Welcome, everyone. We're starting to get people admitted from the Zoom waiting room. We are live streaming Live or Retire Abroad, Finances and Costs. So we'll give people a few more, a minute or two to get joined in, and then we'll get started with our class and our discussion. So while we're waiting, if there's anyone that is on that has any questions about the class or the topic, now is a good time to get them in. And so we'll be able to take any questions right now before we get started too. This is part of a series of classes that we cover live or retire abroad. I've lived in a couple of different countries and had a chance to explore and try out quite a few, figuring out what would work best for me. And of course, with COVID and travel being really restricted, it's difficult. But yesterday, the European Union announced that they will be allowing people who are vaccinated to travel to Europe starting in summer. And I have a son that lives in Barcelona in Spain. He was telling me that it's probably going to be available we'll probably be able to start traveling there in July, is what he said, when they get everything set up to make sure they can track our vaccinations. Okay, so let me go ahead and get started with a few slides and a few discussions here, and then we'll see what kinds of questions we might have. This is a series of classes I do, part of a series I do on live or retire abroad, has to do with finances and costs. I've done classes on live or retire abroad, is it right for you? So if you haven't taken that one, I encourage you to watch the schedule and see when that's going to be offered again. I don't know if it's on the schedule right now or not, but we'll look for it if we can. I'm based in Seal Beach, California. I was born in Chicago. I've worked in the tech industry, and normally I teach technology classes, but I'm teaching some classes on live or retire abroad as kind of a lifestyle type of activity. So if you have questions about living or retiring abroad, we'll share a few things with you. For those of you that have taken classes from Get Set Up, we learn, we're a learning community. It helps if we can see you on camera a little bit, because then I can see when you wave or want to get our attention, but it's not a requirement. If you're joining by live stream, we encourage you to participate and join us and register for a class at getsetup.io. And even though we might be showing you some websites or resources or tools, we're not paid to promote any specific product. We're just, using them as part of our education and training activity. Okay. Thank you, John. John posted a link in chat for the class Live or Retire Abroad, Is It Right for You, which kind of is an introductory one. But if this is your first time in exploring Live or Retire Abroad, this will help you out, because we cover things like finances and costs. So let me review our agenda a little bit here. We're going to talk about some things related to banking and currency. We're going to talk about budgeting and costs. We'll take a look at retirement, pensions, and taxes. We'll talk about some work options and some things you might want to consider about visiting home that can be a factor in living abroad. So I'm just curious, has anyone lived abroad at all before? Anyone that's attending right now, or is this all new for everyone?
Yes, my name is Felicia, and I did a 3-month graduate internship about 20 years ago to the Ivory Coast, Abidjan,
Okay,
Ivory
great.
Coast.
Are you thinking about living abroad again?
Yes, I am. I'm thinking about returning I would like to go to Ghana, and I would like to kind of live there for maybe 6 months and then return back to the States. That's my plan, work and live.
Cool, cool. And Bridget says she's interested in healthcare issues. Yeah. And your grandparents were in Germany and Austria. There's no right or wrong country. I'm going to be, even though this is focused on finances and costs, I'm going to share a few things from my Is It Right For You class, just so you have a little better understanding of the approach. But I do encourage you to take that class as well, and get some information about that. So let's take a look at some things that might be helpful to you. First thing is about moving money around. Okay, so one of the challenges with banking and moving money and dealing with things is that you are moving money from the US dollar to a different currency. And something that takes place when you do that is called an exchange rate and fee. Whenever you convert a dollar into something else, whatever it is, or back again, you will always pay a small commission in exchange fees. Okay, so there's one country that's a popular retirement destination for people in Ecuador that uses the US dollar as their currency. And so you don't have any exchange rate problems. And so that's one way to avoid exchange rate, but exchanging currency, whenever you use a credit card, whenever you use an ATM card, whenever you move money back and forth, it's going to take a little bit of percentage of your dollar every time you do that. So what I recommend people do is they check. One of the first things to do is to check your ATM card and with your bank and see if they charge exchange rate fees when you use it with foreign locations, and see if you can find one. Now, I know Charles Schwab is one that does not charge exchange fees. Someone told me that the Apple credit card doesn't charge exchange rate fees as well. But check with your credit card company and your bank and find one that doesn't charge exchange rate fees. Because if you're just traveling on vacation for a few weeks, it may not be an issue. But if you're going to be spending 3 months, 6 months, a year, or more overseas, it's really, really something you want to try and avoid as much as possible. There are some banking services that you might want to look at. You're going to be using your US bank account. If you're getting money coming into you in the United States, you're going to want to use a US bank account. But there are services that will let you move money to other banks if you want to. A lot of foreign banks do not want to open up bank accounts for US citizens because there's some additional reporting requirements that went into place for things like money laundering and other activities. But you can really use services. One of the most common ones is a service called Zoom.com, and it's actually owned by PayPal. And they let you transfer money from your US bank account to any foreign bank account, and even to places like Western Union offices where you can pick up cash. ATMs, credit cards are going to be great for you to use. I mean, it's electronic banking is really important. And so the idea of having a local bank is not as important as it used to be, but there are countries, and some of the countries that are popular destinations to retire to are popular because they do give people the ability to set up bank accounts as well. So that's one of the things to think about is banking. So your homework for this is to check and find if your bank charges exchange rate fees when you travel overseas to use it, and if you have a credit card that charges exchange rate fees as well. Let's talk about living expenses. Generally, the guideline for moderate living overseas is about $1,500 a month for two. That includes, sorry about that, my mouse sometimes clicks and advances, includes housing, food and moderate dining, utilities, phone, internet, medical care, local transportation, and incidentals. So every part of the world is a different cost structure. We'll take a look at some websites that help you get an idea of what the relative cost is from one place to another. But some people just want to live abroad, and it doesn't really matter where they live, or they want to live abroad in a very luxury location or things like that. John, it was xoom.com is the service that's offered by PayPal. And so it's possible to figure out a budget, and we'll take a look at some people that are available. Those people that talk about what it costs to live in Mexico. But if you're going to live in Norway, for example, a bottle of water at a convenience store in Norway costs $7. Okay, so different parts of the world have different expense structures, and a lot has to do with what the local standard of living is. And there's websites that will tell you that. We'll take a look at some of them. Okay, so this is from a friend of mine that lives with his wife in Ecuador in a city called Cuenca, which is a popular retirement destination for Americans. It's by the equator, but it's about 6,000 feet up in the mountains. And one of the things that happens is when we get into an equatorial climate, it can be hot and humid, but when you get up in the mountains, it becomes much more moderate. So it's a much more spring-like climate all year long. And they get a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, fairly modern. They're in about a 5-year-old building for $500 a month. Their electric bill is $10. First of all, the temperature doesn't get all that hot or all that cold. And so they don't really need a lot of heat or gas or other things. And utility costs are a lot lower overseas. They get phone and internet for $55. Sometimes the apartment throws in, and this is for a furnished apartment, by the way. This is not unfurnished. You can find furnished apartments overseas very easily. They like to cook a lot, and they dine out a fair amount. You can dine out for $20. You can dine out for $1.50. So it really depends on how adventurous you are with local food. You can hire somebody to do house cleaning, to come in several times a week, and whatever incidental expenses. So health insurance is going to be an expense that might get built into there for miscellaneous, but you can find health insurance policies available through American companies that write health insurance policies for people that live overseas. So keep in mind that something like Medicare does not work outside of the United States. And so one of the things you should do is check with any health insurer that you're getting health services from, and contact them and find out from them what their services are that they offer when you travel overseas. Now, many organizations like the Peace Corps, for example, which still takes people at any age, they're going to provide medical insurance for you while you're working in a Peace Corps assignment overseas. So some of those times things will be taken care of, but some people just prefer to pay cash for their medical expenses too. I'm going to bring up a little video. This is a younger couple. It's a different age group, but what they did was they sold their house in Arizona, and they decided to move to Mexico and support themselves by making YouTube videos about living overseas. So they're called Tangerine Travels, and they're honest about what they portray. So I'm going to change a little bit of my sharing here and bring up the video so that we can look at it. Okay, so hold on a second while I get this set up. And let me change my screen sharing so it optimizes for video. Okay, and we'll start this up. Okay, so I'm going to make this full screen, and I'm going to play
In
it.
Mexico, our cost of living. And before we dive in, we want to give a little disclaimer, if you will. We realize that it's super general to say what is our cost of living in Mexico. Mexico is a huge country, but we do feel like we have a pretty unique perspective on this topic because we've been to 39 cities across the country over the course of 16 months. Also, if you're not familiar, we are currently living in Puerto Morelos, which is a small beach town in the state of Quintana Roo between Cancun and Playa del Carmen. So a lot of these costs are going to be very specific to this town. Oh, and in case you notice this snazzy Alaska shirt that I'm wearing, this and other designs are finally ready at tangerinetravels.com. And I hope you're saying finally, because we've been telling you about these t-shirts for, I don't know, a year now, and we got our act together and they are there. tangerinetravels.com.
To start off, we have our rent.
We recently moved into a new place. It is a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment, and we are paying
$500 US a month.
that includes water and internet. If those were not included in our price, what seems to be an average water bill, at least in this area, is about 130 to 160 pesos, depending on water usage.
Yeah, and for internet, our landlord is paying 500 pesos a month. We've seen internet vary from about 200 on the low end to 500 on the high end. Next is electricity. In all the rentals we've had throughout Mexico, this is the first one where we are the ones responsible for paying the electric, and that's because we haven't had air conditioning until now. And if you don't have air conditioning, your electric bill is probably going to be dirt cheap.
A few things to note on the electricity front. It works a little differently here than it does in the US, at least in my experience. We're only paying every 2 months instead of monthly, is what I'm used to in the US. And also there's tier pricing. So if you hit a certain kilowatt usage, the price per kilowatt goes way up. And then at another tier, it goes up even more than that. So it behooves you to conserve electricity and like not blast your air conditioning.
Yeah.
From what we were told in Ajijic, do you want to explain that?
If you reach one of those higher tiers, it's pretty difficult to get back down to the lower tiers. You have to show a low usage for quite a few months in order for them to drop you back down. So you can either literally have a bill that's like $2, or you could have one that's hundreds of dollars depending on your usage. We have not personally got our first electric bill, but after talking to a neighbor and his experience in town, we're estimating an average bill throughout the cold season and hot season being about $75 US a month with air conditioning.
Something else not included in our rent is gas, and the gas is used for hot water, the stove. If we had a washer and dryer, it might be used for that as well. And this last time we filled up with 1,000 pesos for like what I think is an average sized tank. And depending on usage, it could last 3 to 6 months. We cook a lot, so I imagine it's probably going to be about 3 months that it'll last. And so that averages out to $17.47 per month. The next section is food, and we have broken this down into a bunch of different categories: groceries, eating out at restaurants, drinking out at restaurants, drinking water, filtered water for at home, and
Costco membership. Starting with the Costco membership, we buy a lot of our groceries there, and it's a little over $2 a month. And it's much cheaper in Mexico than it is in the US.
however, there's no Costco gas, and that's a feature I really liked in the US. Cheap gas at Costco. The next one is drinking water, and that's us going to like OXXO or the grocery store and getting those big garrafones of water refilled with purified water, and that averages out to about $6.71 a month.
The first time you buy those, you have to pay a deposit for the plastic bottle itself, but every time after that, it's going to be much cheaper, and it's just the refill cost.
Something like 30 pesos or so. The next categories: groceries, eating out, and drinking aloud. Drinking aloud and drinking out. Those fluctuate so much for us. Some months we're basically cooking all at home. Other months we're going out, and it also depends on the city. So we've tried our best to do some averages here of what we've done across the span of 16 months.
For eating out, we fall typically in between the range of $100 and $500 a month. It's a really wide range, totally depending on how much we cook at home.
And we separated out going out for drinks, and we think that averages around $70 a month. Then moving on to groceries, of course, this is another category that just be all over the place. If we're going to local produce markets, that's only about 100 pesos for a week's worth of produce. Crazy
Dirt
cheap.
cheap.
Whereas if we're going to a store like Chedraui or Costco for more things like, I don't know, milk, Greek yogurt, gluten-free pancake mix, we
just
decide
bought
to
that.
get, it'll be much higher. The average of both of those two, we'd say, is around $62.88 per month.
Next is our cell phone bill. Before coming to Mexico, we had T-Mobile, and they actually have a really good plan for Mexico. It's probably the best plan you can have for someone visiting. For the two of us, it was $100 a month. But now we switched to Telcel after a few months in Mexico, and that dropped to a little over $31.
Granted, it's not unlimited data anymore, but it's so inexpensive to buy more. We usually get the 300 peso paquete, and that has
2.5 gigabytes of data, but a lot of times they're running promotion where you get 5 gigabytes.
So if we ever need more, we just pay 100 pesos, 200 pesos to get more data. No big deal. Still much cheaper than we were paying before.
I want to just show you that a little bit perspective to get it from another point of view. They are a younger couple, but they're pretty honest and forthright about what they are communicate. And I found a lot of other people on YouTube that aren't always as realistic about what they've done. Now, admittedly, they're in Mexico, right? So what do you do if you want to travel to a different country? How do you get some sense of what things are going to cost? Well, you use some services that are out there that will help you get an idea. So one of the things that as personal travelers and people living abroad, and I've lived abroad in Barcelona and Thailand and Medellin, Colombia, but you can find out what things are probably going to cost from some websites that are used by commercial companies that send employees to work overseas. I mean, American companies and foreign companies have been sending people to work overseas for decades, and it's not anything new. So what we can take advantage of are some websites that are out there that help us out with that type of information. I'm going to show you two. One is called Numbeo, and another is called Expatistan. Okay, they both are pretty similar in what they offer. So Expatistan, and you're going to get links for these in the email after class. But the Expatistan will give you rankings by city all over the world, and so if they give you a map, and the map shows you the places that are more expensive in red and the places that are less expensive in green. So that's one way to start taking a look at them. Let me move my slide presentation over here a little bit. Okay, so if I scroll down, here is their cost of living index, and it starts out with the most expensive place, and they come up with this thing called a price index, and it's based on all the things that it takes to live somewhere: housing, food, transportation, etc. And they get reports from people that voluntarily submit information. I've done this, and other people do, and they report what things cost, like a gallon of milk, or a taxi ride, or a movie ticket. And as you start to compare your home location, wherever it is, you'll see an index, and you can see what it's going to be like in another location. So if you're looking to go from Fort Worth, Texas to, say, Berlin, Germany, there's not a great deal of cost difference in terms of what it's going to cost to live there. They're both about Fort Worth's 151, Berlin's 149. But if you start to look down the list and you get something like Madrid, 139, Omaha, Nebraska, 135. They're inexpensive places in the US compared to the coast. Memphis, Tennessee, Panama City, Seville, Spain, And so we can start to look at some of these other places. And if we click on a city, let's find Quito, 88. Okay. And I'll show you why that index means something. So Ecuador happens to use the dollar. That's why I picked them, because I don't have to change the currency here. But they'll tell you what's a summary of cost of living in Quito based on what they get from people that voluntarily report information. For a family of four, about $2,400 a month. For a single person, a little over $1,000 a month. Excuse me. So you can get an idea of what lunchtime is going to cost, what a pound of chicken breast, what eggs are going to cost, what housing is going to cost at a furnished expensive area or furnished normal area. Most of us would be comfortable in a normal area. That's where most of the local professionals tend to live. But you're going to be surrounded more by a little more local environment, which gives you some characteristics for that as well. And you get ideas on utilities and other types of expenses. And what Expatistan will give you cost of tickets to the movies. So there's usually places that show English language films in most of the major, cities. Any city over 1 million typically will do that. And other costs and other factors like that. So they'll tell you that the prices are based on abundant and consistent data, meaning this just isn't like one or two people. This is a lot of people reporting information, and you can take advantage of this. Okay, so they have a complete set of, so you can find almost any city in the world to get an idea of what it's going to cost to live there. And you can get rankings, to find out what might make more sense to you. Numbeo, Numbeo, is another site. And one of the things that I like about Numbeo is Numbeo tells you what the average salary is in the country where you're going to. And that can help you from a budgeting standpoint. So that these are other things you can look at. So we have some cost of living rankings here. We can look at different locations, and we can look by country. So Felicia, you were looking at going what, to the Ivory Coast or Ghana? I forgot.
Ghana.
Let
Which
me
is
see
near.
what I can find here. I'm not an expert on Ghana, to be honest with you, but let's see what they have. Okay, so this is what Ghana is, and let's change this to US dollars for you, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Let me find, you got to scroll down this list, pick USD for US dollars, and it'll change things. So a meal in an inexpensive restaurant, $4.32. McDonald's doesn't really vary a lot in price all over the world, I found, so it's not really a good one to take a look at. But then they give you some things. Milk seems really expensive. That's kind of odd, but maybe it's not a lot to get milk. So you can take a look at transportation. A taxi, $1.67. Transportation can be really, really inexpensive in a lot of places. Bus tickets, other things, utilities, electricity, heating, cooling, water, and garbage for a 915 square foot apartment, $72 a month. Internet, about $52 a month. Fitness clubs, there are fitness clubs everywhere in the world. I've never found a shortage of fitness clubs, okay? Clothing, rent. Okay, so here's rent in the city center, a one bedroom, about $638 a month. Usually these are furnished. And a really inexpensive place that might not be in the safest neighborhood, but outside of city center, but you never know until you check it out. Whenever I would go overseas, I would go on 3 trips to every destination I was thinking about going to. I'd stay at a hotel first. One reason is that I didn't know the language usually, and I wanted to get the help of the hotel staff in learning where do expats live? Where do Americans and foreigners live in the city? And I'd learn about the neighborhoods, and I'd arrange for someone through the hotel to take me on a tour. I'd pay a private guide to go tour around the city and pay for a morning or an afternoon. Then I'd go back a second time and I would stay at something like an Airbnb, and I would start to I'd start to go talk to real estate offices, and that's where you typically find rentals. I'd spend some time during the day in an area I was thinking of living in to get an idea of the foot traffic, the amenities that are around there, where there are laundries, where there are pharmacies, where there are, grocery stores that I could walk to, because I preferred walking. And then I'd get an idea of what it costs to go to different places around the city, what Uber rides cost, what taxi rides cost. And then I'd stay somewhere for a month or two, and then I'd decide if I wanted to stay there for an extended period. And I found I'm just cautious that way. And I found that 3-trip approach kind of helped me really become very comfortable with an area. So I felt like I was coming back to something familiar. Picking up and just, burning the boat, moving right away is a lot of work. And so I found for my own personal preference, gradually moving into this as well. Now, what I like about Numbeo is Numbeo shows you, and I'm going to circle this here if I can get this working right. It shows you what the average monthly net salary is for people in that country. And
Wow.
that's going, yeah, wow, right? That's going to tell you a lot about what things cost. Now, if you live like a Westerner, if you stay in all the Western parts of town, if you stay at the Marriotts and all of these things, you're not going to save a whole lot of money. But if you venture into the more, a little bit into the more local areas, and there are areas where, professionals and other people live, because there's professionals all over the world. You would probably feel very comfortable, but you're going to find as soon as you get into a little bit more local environment, the cost structure just drops dramatically. So, but things like utilities, I mean, they can't charge somebody who's making $330 a month, a lot of money for utilities, but also their labor costs are lower. The labor costs filter out into all parts of the economy. Pharmacies, drug care, grocery store workers, taxi drivers, restaurants, other things, so that the cost structures are very much pegged to a lot of the average monthly net salary as well. So you can really get an idea. And that's why countries like in Latin America and Central America, where the average monthly net salary in places like Ecuador is about 450 a month. In Medellin, Colombia, it's about 425 a month. So you get the benefit of cost savings. If you go to someplace like Germany, it's probably going to be comparable to the United States in terms of average monthly salary. So you're going to find the cost structure very, very similar in terms of what you have to pay. And in some cities in the world, the cost structure is going to be more expensive because there are destination cities like New York or Los Angeles or Tokyo or London or things like that. But it really, I find these two sites, Expatistan and Numbeo, are great for helping you do your research on different topics and finding ideas about what's within your budget, what's within your budget. And they advertise, so you're going to see ads about, things like that, but that's how they support them. But you can actually search for specific cities as well. And they even have things like a quality, Numbeo has like a quality of life index. So you can get ideas of crime and healthcare and pollution and traffic and other things like that, if that's something. They do have a premium. Now, commercial, who might buy a premium license for this type of site? Well, companies and organizations that send a lot of people overseas. So nonprofits that send, people overseas on, say, missions, or humanitarian causes. They might buy a license, so they want to license the information and be able to do a lot of things that way. So, but we can take advantage of this for free by just going to these websites. You're going to get links to these websites in the email after the class too.
Thank you.
Any questions about that? I found them great resources, great resources.
Bob, I want to know when you said you would go like 3 times before you kind of settled in on the country, how long did you stay the first time? Maybe a couple of weeks or so, or?
That was it. That was kind of an exploratory trip.
Okay.
I read this article about 10 countries where you can live really comfortably on 1,500 a month, and so I said, well, let me go start visiting them. And I actually got to 8 of them. I didn't get to all 10.
Oh, okay.
But I would go and I'd stay. Like I said, I would go into a hotel. It's easy, it's quick, it's fast, and you're in a very comfortable environment where you've got some staff at the hotel that they're not going to send you where you're going to get in trouble typically.
Right.
Unless you ask them for that, that's another story, right? But if you ask them, hey, where's a good gym to go to? Where do Americans? I found that in every city I visited, there were restaurants where Americans would hang out, and they had bulletin boards where they had information about housing and activities and other things like that were available. One of the websites that I used to kind of start this journey was one called International Living, and they're kind of the general purpose. They run a publication, and they have information. They do country reports on different countries to go to as well. So they tend to focus on the popular areas for people to go and live or retire overseas. And generally they're Latin American or they're Southeast Asian, or in Europe, it tends to be Portugal, Spain, and southern France. Those are the most affordable locations. Plus the Mediterranean climate makes it a little more comfortable as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I have friends that just would pick up and go, and they had no problem doing it, so that they were really quite adventurous in that sense. But everybody's got a little bit different approach to doing it. And so it's a good idea, but I'm a big one on research ahead of time. That's just me though. It's not everybody, and I understand that. So one of the things to budget for is coming back to the US. And a lot of this depends on how you will be returning home and what you will be returning home to. If you are selling your house, I sold my house, right? And so I was going to live in apartments. And if you're not used to living in an apartment, I suggest you try it, for a little while, get used to it, because you're going to have neighbors that are closer. You're going to deal with an apartment building. But then I got kind of really used to the idea of not really worrying about maintenance on a home. And I have friends that have to worry about replacing light bulbs and switches and transformers and plumbing and getting, termite damage repaired and painting. And you don't realize how much work that is until you stop doing it. And then all of a sudden you have all this time available. But think about your home in the US and if it's something you need to come back to. Okay. So if you need to come back to the US, where are you going to stay? And how much is it going to cost you to stay there? So that if you don't have a home to come to, can you stay with family members, for example? I have a friend that's a real digital nomad. He owns a home that he rents out, but he doesn't have a lease on an apartment. He actually, when he comes to the US, he stays with his son, and his son rents a room. And so they're really, really, helpful in doing that. But he doesn't have a car, so he has to rent a car when he comes back to the US. Now, I prefer living in a location that is more walkable, but that's not easy to find in the United States. But if you live in a smaller area and that where you can get around, I keep my car. I have a community I live in that's a adult over 55 community, but it's security guard gated. And there's a lot of people here that, like me, that just lock up and go, and the community set up to support that. So when I come back, I decided when I come back to the US, I like to have a landing zone. And it was good because COVID hit, right? And so it was helpful for me to do that. But budget in airfare costs, what it's going to cost you to stay somewhere. If you're going to need a car, where you're going to get that car from, and where you're going to eat when you think about coming back to the U.S. because those are factors that will cost. I knew one of the times I did this class, I talked to a family that this was several years ago. They rented their house and they were going to take a year-long cruise around the world. They decided to do it that way. There are some people that they live out of their RV and that's their home, and they just pay for parking places. So the visits to the US can kind of throw people's budgets off, which is why I mentioned that as something. Now I'm going to look at chat. So Virginia, great idea, Virginia, recommending Facebook groups. There are a lot of Facebook expatriate. When you move overseas, you're an expatriate, no matter what country you're from. And so there are a lot of Facebook groups that wherever you're thinking of going, whether it's Medellin or Bangkok or France or Barcelona or something like that, research Facebook and look for a Facebook group of expats because they will help you out as well. You'll start to get connected with people, just like the bulletin boards and the restaurants and the fitness centers. You'll get connected with people through Facebook groups as well. Great idea. Bridget, any reason to come back to the US? Well, depends on what you've got here, right? And whether you need to. So you don't have to come back to the US if you don't want to. But the more you can do things. Now, one of the things that I suggest to minimize any trips is get everything you can into electronic files. Learn to use the cloud and get everything set up on automatic payments or other things like that, automatic deposit, automatic payments. And people in the RV industry or RV enthusiasts have really helped pioneer a lot of things. Like there are mail centers that do mail scanning. So if you need a physical address in the US, you can get one from a mail center and they will receive your mail for you. They'll scan the envelopes and they'll email you the scans of the envelopes. You can tell them which ones you want to open and which ones you don't, and which ones they can throw away and which ones you'd like to have forwarded to you. But the more you can deal with it electronically, the better off you are. I mean, my middle son has lived overseas now for 9 years steadily. He was in the online, he was in the casino business. He went to work for a company in Stockholm. Then he moved to Barcelona. And then he married his wife, and she had a daughter from a previous relationship, and they live in Barcelona in a house, and they've been living there for about 4 years now. So he's been in Europe steadily. He comes back to the US once in a while for work, for business, for family trips and things like that. But you don't have to come back to the US if you don't want to. It's all about what you might need to do, but think about things that might trigger emergency trips, because those can be pricey if you have to get a ticket right away and come back. And right now with COVID, it's tough to travel, but it's going to get easier by the summertime. Okay. Just create a simple spreadsheet. You're going to get links to these in the handout when I send it out. And just think about housing, medical, electricity, gas, use the Numbeo and the Expatistan tools to help you out. Think about what you've got coming in and just plan a budget for yourself. So think about just any other type of activity. Budgeting is a really good activity to do, but also think about overseas travel. Some people, like when they go overseas, they say, I'm going to stay in Barcelona. And when I was in Barcelona, I used it as kind of a jumping off point. I could find really cheap weekend airfares to Paris, to London, to Rome. And so I went off on trips to various places for just 3 or 4 days. And it was really easy to do. But that was an additional expense. But you do that once a month, it's not so bad. But if you do it 2 or 3 times a month, it can add up very quickly. If you make money in the US, you are going to pay US taxes. Okay, so if you have Social Security, just get it direct deposited. Pensions, direct deposit. Investment income, digital nomad work that you can get from, line it up in the US before you go overseas. But if you're paid in dollars, it's probably going to result in you filing income taxes in the US and probably in state as well. Okay, so keep that in mind, that it's the requirements for not paying taxes in the US are really, really difficult to meet. You have to have all foreign income pretty much, and you can't be in the US for more than about 2 or 3 weeks out of the year in order to exclude yourself from US income tax. But you got to make the money in foreign income. So just expect that's going to happen. Now, if you live or work or retire, you've got some ideas. So retirement's a little bit different than working or being self-employed. The best way to be self-employed is if you can line up work in the United States as a digital nomad, because then you're going to be paid in dollars. You'll have a higher standard of living income. But there are local businesses that also hire people overseas, and we'll take a look at some of these sites. You get different types of work, and there's a lot of people. I met some people that basically paid for their lodging by doing work for people as they traveled around. So they worked a little bit and they traveled. And so those are some things that you can think about. Now, some of these sites that are available are some that you may never have heard of. And so we'll move from Expatistan and Numbeo to something called Flex Jobs. Flex Jobs is a job site to find remote work from home and flexible job. And they're really one of the big, they've been around a long time, and they're really very reputable, very, good things. You can do searches, you can put your resume up on there, and they've been very popular even before COVID, and work from home became a big way to do things. So they're one of the ones to find a remote working job if you're interested in that. Some other opportunities are a little different. Something like Workaway, and you're going to get a link to this in the email handout. Workaway gives you options to find a host. So there are hosts and there are travelers. So hosts are people that are willing to offer lodging or food or sometimes money in exchange for a traveler willing to participate and do some work with them. And it's kind of an interesting approach. So as a traveler, you usually these sites require a small $30 to $40 a month fee because they want to screen out a lot of people that aren't really legitimate looking. So they people that are available list themselves, and people that are hosts list themselves. So the host opportunities can be anywhere in the world. You can see Zambia, Russia, Australia, but Norway, Sweden, Luxembourg, Canada. So it's interesting where you find things, and the hosts get reviewed and the travelers get reviewed. It's kind of like an eBay, auction for hosts and travelers. And you can also look for a type of exchange. If you want to work for an NGO, that's short for non-government organization, that's usually a nonprofit, okay? Or you want to do something with a family, okay? A lot of families will put up Americans because they want their children to learn English and and so they'll do that, or helping out at a local school, or community organizations, or animal welfare, or house sitting, or people move a lot of things. People move boats around the world. There are a lot of people that have funding for sustainable projects, or if you're interested in doing a little more work, a farm stay can be an option too. Now they don't, they'll tell you what you've got to do. Okay, so let's take a look at somebody in Luxembourg, help on our organic farm in Beckerich, Luxembourg. What kind of a host is this? Okay, so they've got some ratings, they've got some feedback. They reply very well in about 2 days. And this tells you a little bit about them. They're a family with 2 children. We grow organic vegetables 10 miles away from Arlon, Belgium. You'll live in a house only for helpers in the main road of our little village. The field is a kilometer away. We have a bus connection to Luxembourg City, about 33 kilometers away. And your accommodation will be a bedroom in our house where you can cook and eat together after work in the field. Don't be afraid of getting dirty, and be prepared to do physical work. We need volunteers that are responsible, clean, and respectable. Work starts at 7 from Tuesday through Saturday. Okay, so the weekends and the afternoon, Sunday and Monday is free. Okay, so it's work. Okay, so you got to be careful about what you sign up for. But they're saying, okay, minimum stay requested at least 3 weeks. But if you're trying to pay your way to travel around the world, that would be one way to do it. There's people that do these things. So that's one opportunity. And you can look at, if you're looking for something, maybe you would rather help at a local school, and you can see hosts here, help teach Spanish, support our dance institute in Ghana. So this is an interesting one. So support our dance institute in Ghana. Goodwin's a dance instructor, and he has from a small village, and he is teaching children how to dance. Okay, kind of an interesting assignment. So tells you a little bit about the work, where they put you up, what the language is. What you've got available for use, and other things that are part of it. So it's an interesting approach to traveling around the world. Okay. When you're looking at Europe, Dania has a question, and I cover that in visas a little bit, but yeah, let me talk a little bit about visas. If you are looking at traveling anywhere outside of the US, you typically will have permission to travel for 90 days, okay? So when you travel somewhere for 90 days, you're traveling as a tourist. If you want to stay somewhere for longer than 90 days, you typically have to get a visa. And that means you have to get a visa from the local government. Usually it's through the embassy in advance, or you can arrange for it once you travel overseas. And that visa gives you the ability to stay for a longer period of time. So these are other assignments, like being a native English speaker, teaching English as a foreign language, the work trade, and the Peace Corps that I mentioned earlier as well. And you get links to these sites as well. So I want to show you one more thing before we leave here. I want to show you the International Living website. Normally, this is in the Live or Retire Abroad, Is It Right for You? Kind of review, kind of an overview approach. This is a session a little more focused on finances, work, money, issues, things like that. But International Living is a website. I'm going to put that in chat for you. They're a good starting point. If this is new to you, keep in mind they're a magazine and they do accept advertising, but they do have a lot of information about countries that you can look at. Not every country will show up, but they do have top countries they recommend. They do always want you to subscribe to their magazine. And so they may not have everything that you want to look for, but they're a good starting point if this is something that's new to you. But keep in mind that International Living will make almost everything sound like it's a vacation, because they really do have their articles kind of paint a rose-colored picture of everything for you. So any questions? Okay, I hope I've given you some information to think about finances, for income, for expenses, comparisons, way you can kind of compare some things to what it might cost you in the US. We do have, a couple of other Live or Retire Abroad classes. Thank you, John, for posting in the chat the link. I don't know if it'll come up as an option I can send you in the email that I'll send you, but there is I'd recommend you look at a class we give on virtual travel with Google Earth. Normally I teach a lot of technology classes, but because I've lived abroad, one of the community colleges that I used to teach at asked me to do this kind of class, and I kind of adapted it for Get Set Up. When you receive the email notes, you'll be able to recommend this class to a friend. You'll be able to give us feedback. You'll be able to take a look at some suggestions. And when you register for classes now, and you sign up for a class, you have the ability to invite a friend. So I had a friend that joined me on about 4 trips to different countries. It was actually a lot of fun. I said, hey, listen, we're going to go to real estate agents. We're going to check out grocery stores. We're going to go, talk to find expat, communities and talk to people. And I said, we're not going to play tourist all the time. And he said, okay, fine. And he had a really good time on the trip doing that. So that's the way to do it. So host an interest group. We use our members and invite them to host interest groups, suggest classes. You can request a recording at help@getsetup.io. Thank you, John, by the way, for being a great TA in the session and posting some links. And if you have any questions, I can stay on for a few minutes and help answer any questions that you might have. So Felicia, you ready to go?
Yes, I've been ready.
Okay, Bridget, thank you for your
Thank you, Bob.
Facebook groups. That's really valuable. I had forgotten about that, and I'm glad you mentioned it because they're great. Do you know where you're thinking about going, Bridget?
Yes, we're planning to go. I mean, the final place will be Portugal.
Okay.
But I've hosted exchange students over the years, and they all know we're going to come and visit them. So there's going to be like 3 months in the Asian area because we got Thailand, Japan, and Vietnam that we have to go visit. And then my husband would like to do the Caribbean islands, and we want to do like the slow travel where we just stay at an Airbnb and just, not rush around and try to see everything at once.
Yeah, there are people that actually are international nomads. Not so much right now, but before COVID.
Well, there's one couple. They're both a lady couple, and they're currently, last time I was following up on them, they're in Malta.
Yeah.
And the question about how long can you stay? What they do is they go from an EU country, then they'll go to like Turkey, and stay there for 3 months, and then they'll go to another EU country, and that way they don't have to deal with the visa issue.
Right, yeah, in the EU, there's the visa policies are actually governed by an organization called the Schengen Zone.
Could you please read?
No, ignore that.
The Schengen Zone, and Schengen is not EU. Schengen is a visa cooperative. So, like my daughter-in-law is Ukrainian, and Ukraine is part of the Schengen Zone. They had her mother come over and stay with them in Barcelona, like you said, for 90 days. She had to go back to Ukraine and stay there for 90 days. Then she could come back to Barcelona again. So there's some restriction. Now in Thailand, where I stayed, you could just cross the border into Cambodia for a day, and Thailand renewed your 90-day tourist visa right away. So every place is a little bit different. Part of traveling around the world is getting used to the fact that everything's different, so yeah, that's part of the fun too. So if you approach it as an adventure, it's really great. Okay, so well, thank you all for coming this afternoon or evening for you and participating, and let us know where you end up traveling to. Okay, and we'd appreciate it. Thanks, Lily. Thank you, Dania. Thank Bridget. Thanks, Felicia, Virginia, and John, our TA. Thank you to you as well. Appreciate it. Right.
Have a
Bye-bye,
great
everybody.
night.
Have a
Bye-bye.
good night.
Thank you, Bob.